This video is sponsored by TokyoTreat. Big thanks to them for supporting the channel yet again. Most of what I cover here is on the spooky side of Japan, so it's nice when a package shows up that I don't have to worry about being haunted or cursed. TokyoTreat is a monthly Japanese snack box, and every month it's packed with new and exclusive treats straight from Japan. You always get a rare Kit Kat flavor, limited edition chips, noodles, sweets, you name it. This month's theme is Snacktastic Moonfest, celebrating tsukimi or moon viewing. It's a tradition in Japan where people gather under the full harvest moon, enjoy food together, and welcome the change of seasons. TokyoTreat even includes a cultural guide booklet which explains each snack, has allergen information, and gives you little insights into Japanese culture. Some of my favorites this time were the Mont Blanc Kit Kats, chestnut and white chocolate layered with wafers. It's such a proper autumn flavor, it's lush. The Pokemon fruit jellies are so fun too. You can freeze them for a chilled treat on hot days. And I've got to say, the seaweed salt potato chips are ridiculously addictive. And they've even included a full moon egg soup, which feels perfect for a late night treat when the moon is bright. There are so many goodies crammed into this box, and if you want to try one out for yourself or send one as a gift, use my code JNightmares with the link below for $5 off your first TokyoTreat box. Thanks again to TokyoTreat for sponsoring this video. This video is also sponsored by Sakurako. Big thanks to them as well for always supporting the channel. So if TokyoTreat is the modern playful side of Japanese snacks, then Sakurako is the traditional one. Sakurako is a monthly Japanese artisan snack box that supports local makers across Japan. And inside you'll see seasonal wagashi, things like mochi, manju, dorayaki, as well as teas and even an exclusive homeware item in every box. This month's theme is Autumn Moon Festival, also celebrating tsukimi. Like TokyoTreat, you get a cultural booklet that explains the snacks, has allergy information, and gives you a background on some of these great traditions. My favorites this time were the mikan cream cookies, paired with that tsukimi gokokucha tea, which I served in this beautiful Unomi teacup that came in the box. Just look at this thing, it's really nice. There was also these blueberry tarts that were absolutely excellent too. They had a crispy custard crust with a sweet jammy center. And there were these usagi manju with its subtle white bean filling that really stood out for me too. What I like about Sakurako is that everything feels seasonal and carefully chosen. It's like getting a little festival from Japan delivered to your door. So if you'd like to try it out for yourself or send one to a friend or someone who just loves Japan, then, use my link below and you get your exclusive discount on your Sakurako box or the TokyoTreat box. Thanks again to them both for sponsoring this video and being a supporter of the channel in general. Check them out. Now, lights down. Tonight's episode goes somewhere a lot less welcoming. Would you live in a home where something terrible happened? In Japan, these places are called JIKOBUKKEN, stigmatized properties, addresses marked by tragedy, where someone died under unsettling or unclear circumstances. Fresh paint, new flooring, and yet something clings to the air that cleaning can't touch. You might think of Ju-on, The Grudge, a cursed house that dooms every new tenant. That's fiction, but the fear behind it isn't. Across Japan there are countless rooms with histories people would rather not inherit. There are even public sites like Oshima Land that catalogue reported cases. This series is about those rooms. Some accounts are first-hand, others feel like the kind of stories neighbors only tell once. What they share is a weight that you can feel, quiet, heavy, and patient. Tonight we're stepping into listings priced a little too low. Too good to be true. Doors that don't like staying shut, and spaces that hold on to people who never fully left. So if you're ready, keep one light on. Here's the bells. This is something I went through years ago, back when I was living in an old 2-story wooden apartment block. The building itself had age. Thin walls, the faint sweet smell of old timber after rain. But inside had just been renovated and it looked freshly done. The tatami had been replaced with shiny flooring that caught the light, and it was absolutely spotless. It was a 1K, bath and toilet separate. There was even a little washroom. If I remember right, the kitchen was about 4 tatami mats wide, and the living room about 6, so it wasn't massive, but it was great for me. And the rent was the best part. It was only 40,000 yen. For central Tokyo, that was a bargain. And personally, I loved the place. But there's always a catch. That night I'd been out late at a company drinking party, so I think I reached my apartment a little before 1 in the morning. I took the last train home. I climbed the outdoor stairway and walked down the landing to my door. Something about it felt off. Looking back, I really wish I listened to that twinge and decided not to go in. I regret that, honestly and completely. When you stepped into my flat, the kitchen was on the immediate left. On the right were doors leading to the washroom, the toilet, and the bathroom. Straight ahead, a sliding door separated the kitchen from the living room. I normally kept that sliding door open, only shutting it when I was cooking. As I came up to my door, I had the sense, through the kitchen's frosted glass, of something moving inside, as if it was swaying gently. At the time, I told myself it was nothing, probably just a trick of the light as I approached, or just something from outside reflecting, a street lamp. I took the key from the pocket of my suit without thinking much of it and opened the door. And that's when I realized something in the room was moving. My apartment was mostly dark, so it was hard to make out, but there was something long hanging from the living room ceiling, right there at the opening of the sliding door, which had been left slightly ajar. It was drifting slowly, so slowly, just rocking side to side. I had never put anything up like that, so I stopped where I stood, unsure what I was looking at. After a few moments, my eyes adjusted, with the help of the moonlight leaking in from the outside, and by really focusing on it, I realized it was somehow a human head. I don't know how to explain it properly, but it was as if a person was hanging upside down from the ceiling, from a place where the nape met the ceiling. A head and its long hair were pushing down into my room, using the weight of whatever body might have been hidden above the ceiling. It swung back and forth like a pendulum. I couldn't see a face. I could tell it was turned away from me. And after a while I noticed that the swinging had grown stronger than before. At first, it had been a lazy side-to-side drift. Now it had become longer, heavier. Its arc slower, then longer and longer. With that, the range of motion grew wider. I didn't dare move. More than anything, I was terrified that if I made a sound, it might turn towards me. That thought alone pinned me in place. And then the swinging became more vigorous, from right to left, left to right. Each sweep set the long hair chasing after it in a violent rush. I could just make out the dry hush of hair brushing in the air, and the wooden ceiling began to complain in low creaks. The pace quickened further, the arc widening until the head started striking the ceiling at that exact point. Thud, thud, thud. It was hammering at a frightening pace. The long hair whipped and tangled into a mess. The hiss of the hair, cutting the air, wasn't faint anymore. It was crisp, like a stiff brush being dragged over wood. The ceiling answered in tight, painful creaks, the old beams bowing under strain, as if something up there was leaning harder into the swing. This is bad, was all my brain could manage. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, and then a barrage of knocks detonated behind me, on my front door. Not a polite tap, a hard, urgent rattle that made the metal skin of the door vibrate. Every part of me was locked up. The thing in the living room was still beating the ceiling, thudding away, hair whispering and snapping around it, while the door boomed again behind me. Pinned between the two, I couldn't decide which way to move. My mouth was dry. Another round of pounding. I forced myself to turn inch by inch, and I slid towards the door, keeping the thing in my peripheral vision as long as I dared. I unlatched it and pulled it open a crack. My neighbor stood there in slippers, face unreadable, in a low voice. "Could you keep it down?" I blinked. The flat had fallen silent. I looked back. The doorway to the living room was just a dark square again, nothing moving, nothing hanging, as if the air had stitched itself back together. I didn't even try to step inside. I shut the door and walked to the stairs without looking left or right, and I spent the night under the fluorescent lights of a nearby net cafe. In the morning, with daylight making me braver, I went to the apartment. Everything looked normal, except on the floor, beneath the spot in the ceiling where that thing had dangled. There were a few long strands of hair scattered about. After that, I took only what I needed from the flat, and I spent a few weeks living out of cheap hotels until I could move out, and I got out of there as quickly as I could. This is something I was told. Sorry, it isn't first-hand. Nothing like a curse with a catastrophic fallout, but when I heard it, I felt a thin chill go up my back. And if you live alone, it might get to you a bit. I heard it at drinks from a senior who told me about their friend. Let's call him Akira Sato. A few years earlier, when Akira got into university, he was dead set on living alone. Money was tight and the campus was commutable, so his family pushed back. As a compromise, Akira got offered a room in an apartment that his uncle Kenji, owned. The deal was minimum allowance and handle the rest yourself. So Akira said, "As cheap as possible, please." The room Uncle Kenji pointed to wasn't an accident property, but it did have a reputation. A few tenants before, the resident struggled with mental health and, in the end, tragically, took his own life. But outside, not in the unit, you see. Since then, tenants never stayed long, and the place was sort of left alone due to a growing reputation. Uncle Kenji warned him, "At your price, this is the only one I can give you. But honestly, I don't recommend it. To be blunt, I don't like the air in that room. I don't like the feel of it at all." Akira was a bold one. "The cheaper the better. I'll be fine. I don't worry about all that spooky stuff. It really doesn't bother me," he said, and he pushed through, moving in. Akira did have some logic behind that confidence. The person hadn't passed away in the room, and none of the later tenants who had left had any serious aftermath like hospitalization or accidents, according to Uncle Kenji. So it wasn't as strange as he thought. Whatever happens, I'll just deal with it. Either way, he got what he dreamed of. His own place, and he couldn't be prouder of that. But once he actually lived there, he could see why people called it creepy. Most days, nothing. But every now and then, late at night, when the apartment and its surroundings fell silent, he'd hear a sound. Shiny, 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 shiny. A light, almost sprightly rubbing together of some sort. Subtle enough that if you weren't paying attention, you'd probably miss it. Yet there it was, from somewhere. Uncle Kenji had already checked, after complaints from previous tenants, that it wasn't the other residents in the building. So if it wasn't them, it had to be coming from Akira's own room. And still, it came. At first, Akira ignored it. After a while, though, it got under his skin, and he started checking all over the room to where that sound came from. Even so, he couldn't find a source, and he was getting irritated. Then one night again, while he was in bed, from experience he learned that if he stomped around, the sound would stop. So this time he slid carefully out of bed without making a sound, held his breath and listened hard, trying his best to trace the sound. As you'd expect in a story like this, it was coming from the closet. A real jolt went through him. His brain was torturing him with various scenarios. He snapped on the ceiling light and turned on a late-night radio show and waited until the sound went away, and only then he tried to sleep. The next day he decided to re-inspect the closet, the same place he'd checked multiple times before. He called Uncle Kenji, explained, and the two of them opened up the closet. Inside were just a few of Akira's things. Nothing looked suspicious. They steeled themselves, pulled everything out, and decided to crawl in and check the property. And that's when they found something unexpected. Hi, Jay here. Quick note. This isn't a Western-style wardrobe. An oshiere is a built-in closet in a tatami room. Sliding doors, which has a deep cavity for futons and a mixed upper shelf with a thin plywood ceiling. Sometimes that panel can be lifted, and above it is a dusty crawl space that nobody uses. If you have seen The Grudge, then you probably know what I mean. Back to the story. Akira's unit was on the second floor of a 2-story building. The upper shelf of the closet had a plywood ceiling nailed in place, normally not meant to come off. Looking closely, they saw one edge of the plywood panel had its nails removed so it could pop free. Usually it was pressed back in snug, like it couldn't be taken down. Suspicious enough, they eased it out, and there wasn't enough room to get a head in, just a narrow gap. Akira, heart beating fast, reached up blindly into the space and started rummaging around. His fingers hit something, not big, but hard and heavy, and he pulled it out. It was a pair of scissors. No, more than that. Big iron dressmaking shears, the kind for cutting cloth. The blades were rusted to a dark, reddish brown, crumbling at the edges. Seeing that, Akira realized something. Look how rusted these things are. They must have been up here for ages. Uncle Kenji replied to him, Akira, I don't think that's rust. When his uncle said that, his face drained white. Even Akira's bravado collapsed, and the shears slipped from his hands. Then came the explanation about the former tenant, Nao Takahashi. Nao had been unwell for a long time and had the habit of hurting himself. The family lived not too far away and visited often, trying to look after Nao. To stop him from doing so, they went through the home and took every blade they could find. But each time they confiscated something, Nao would go out and just buy another, use it, and then they'd take it again. It was an ugly, frightening, and sad loop. When the family tried to bring Nao home, Nao would fight and become impossible to manage, so they settled for living separately, visiting often and trying to keep watch. In time, though, Nao passed away. The family came, cleared out Nao's belongings, and that was that. Except, it looked like Nao had hidden these shears up there, so that his family wouldn't find them. Even if all the rest were taken away, at least one remained. Thinking back, that shaddy sound had to be the sound of the scissor blades rubbing together. No one after that had been physically hurt by those blades, but maybe Nao's restless spirit, unable to move on, came back to the room, pulled out the hidden shears from his secret hiding spot in the closet, and fell back into the old habit. And when that thought landed, Akira was overwhelmed by a deep crawling fear and a wave of sadness. After that, Uncle Kenji returned the shears to Nao's family, and they held a memorial service. The strange sounds stopped. Akira kept living there, all the way through to graduation. That's the end. The whole open the closet ceiling to the crawl space setup made me think of Ju-on. I remember being oddly impressed that Akira actually reached up there. If it were me, I'd have just made my uncle do it. The genkan to a sliding door, which I kept open because it made the place feel a little bigger. On the day I viewed it and agreed to move in, The agent did his fast smile and handed me the keys. Drafty, but quiet, he said, which is code for, "You're getting a deal, don't ask for follow-ups." I moved in with mismatched plates, 2 lamps, and a bed frame that I put together wrong on my first try. The first odd thing was small enough to ignore. I came home late from work, walked up the outside stairs that ping when you miss the sweet spot, and at my door I got a little wrong note feeling, like the music's still playing but the band dropped a beat. Through the kitchen, from the entryway, the frosted panel showed a smudge of movement, as if something inside had chosen to sway once and then go still. I told myself it was just headlights from the street bending through the far window. That explanation fit well enough to unlock the door. I didn't know at the time, but that was my first warning sign. Nights settled into their grooves. I learned which neighbor wheeled their bike in after midnight, who played the TV too loud until 2, and then a week in, I started hearing bare feet on my floor. Not out in the corridor, inside, from the kitchen along the hall to the entrance. A simple loop. Wood knows the difference between shoes and skin. The boards answered like they recognized weight. Pat, pat, pat. Then a pause right at the door. The faintest touch in the door handle, as if gravity had leaned on it. No rattle, no try at the lock, just a presence, an unmistakable, patient presence. The first time, I held my breath and I listened until my ears rang. It didn't repeat that night. It came back the next one, and the next. Mornings began to add their own habit. I sleep with the bedroom door closed. It's how I separate the living space from feeling like it's watching me. Day 4 of the footstep loop, I found the door cracked open, a measured hand's width. I stood there with my fingers on the edge of it, contemplating how this could have happened. I shut it firmly, fitting the latch with a click that felt too thin to count as certainty. The next morning it was open again, to that same exact span, like a ruler had been laid against it in the night. I tested things that made me feel like I was doing something, a towel at the base of the door to block air, close the window, open the window, the old shut the door softly versus shut it hard experiment. The result didn't care. Sometime between 3 and 4 a.m. the room cooled down, and the door eased itself open to precisely the same notch of dark. I told no one because there isn't a good way to say any of that without hearing how it sounds. I focused on the useful details. The tap dripped if I didn't set it just right. The fridge hummed on a note that matched the bathroom fan. The building settled with elastic creaks of old timber doing its slow breathing, and yet the footsteps kept to their circuit. Kitchen, hall, door, and the door kept to its small betrayal, opening softly at some moment in the dead of night. It was Tuesday when the apartment answered back. I'd left the washroom light on because the bulb was on its last legs and it took a while to warm. I lay on the futon with that city tiredness that's not quite sleep and not wake, counting the cars as they turned the corner by timing their tires on the manhole cover. Somewhere after that, the air pressed in a little. Nothing dramatic. It just the kind of sense that the apartment had shifted its attention. I didn't hear it approach, but I knew it was beside me, the way you know when someone steps to your shoulder. Close enough to read the temperature of my ear. A voice, low and unhurried, spoke in the smallest possible space between skin and air.
"That's my room."
No anger, no rasp, not even surprise, just a corrected fact at the volume you use when you're close enough that only one person needs to hear it. I didn't twist around like a character in some bad reenactment, but my body went very still. Not out of theatre, just because stiffness felt like the one thing that wouldn't make anything worse. The washroom light hummed, flickered once and steadied. Out on the street, the vending machine compressor kicked on. The refrigerator clicked into cycle like it always did at that hour, and nothing else argued with the moment. A few moments later, I sat up slow, turned the washroom light off, and stood at the threshold of the bathroom to look at the door. It was open to the same hand's width it favored every morning. The latch, when I pressed it with my thumb, worked exactly as advertised, and the handle was cool. The next day I did what you do when you want to feel like a person in charge of a lease. I packed a bag with the essentials. My wallet, documents, a week's worth of clothes. I locked the apartment twice, and put my ear to the door long enough to hear the shape of quiet. I slept at a business hotel by the station. I just wanted to be somewhere where no one knew my name. I was scared. And when I came back, in daylight to collect the boxes, the apartment behaved. The hallway felt like a hallway, the kitchen threw its light as usual, a weak cone, and in the bedroom the door, of course, sat half open, as if it had been holding the position for my arrival. The agent didn't blink when I said I was moving out. "Old building, huh?" he said, with that shrug that Tokyo agents have. A shrug that means, don't make this my problem. "Air currents, the latch maybe. Well, we can send someone to adjust it." He smiled without looking at me, and suggested a unit across town that was 2 floors higher, and 2 sizes smaller, at a higher rent. I took the loss. I learned the sound of a new corridor. I placed my bed differently. I keep the bedroom door open now, because I don't like taking the risk. I guess people want a big ending in stories like this. A face in the mirror, a door that slams like punctuation. This apartment didn't do any of that. It insisted softly and with precision. The nightly bare feet and the half-open line of the dark. The sentence spoken inches from her ear that didn't want to hear it. I guess renting taught me something. The place is never yours. I know that sounds obvious when you rent, but what I mean is it doesn't always give you ownership. Some places let you borrow their rooms, and some tell you quietly they were never yours. My parents' new home was in one of those suburban housing developments that pop up where there used to be fields or farmland. They had built an entire neighborhood on what used to be rice paddies. It was all new houses, shiny and modern, packed closely together. For my sister and me, the most exciting part was finally having our own rooms. We'd never had that before, and we spent days planning on how we were going to decorate. Even though the house was finished, we didn't move in right away, due to some complications. Still, we went there on weekends, sleeping over and getting the feel of what life in our new house would be like. The first night I stayed in my new room, I was thrilled at first. I'd never slept alone, so this was new and maybe even a little unsettling. I had my cat with me though, and that made it feel a little less lonely. I even left the door cracked open so he could come and go as he pleased, but as soon as the lights went out and everything went quiet, I started to feel uneasy. You know that sensation where you just know someone's there, even though you can't see or hear them? That's exactly how I felt. My eyes kept darting to the staircase just outside my door. It was like there was something moving down there, slowly, but I couldn't see anything. My heart started racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever it was coming up the stairs, and it was heading right for my room. Then, as if that wasn't bad enough, I started getting the creepiest sensation from my closet. It was the same thing, like someone was standing there, on the other side of the room, just waiting for the right moment. My skin started to crawl, but I kept telling myself, come on, it's a brand new house, there's no way there's anything here. Ghosts don't haunt new houses. This is your imagination running wild. I wish that had been enough to calm me down, but then I heard it. This weird breathing coming from the open window. It was faint at first, like someone was panting. I strained to hear, hoping that it was just the wind, but it only got louder and more distinct. This was a slow, ragged breathing that went, ha, ha. Is there some creep outside my window? I thought, panicking a little. But there was nothing beneath my window. No ledge, no tree, no place for anyone to stand. Nobody should be able to get that close. Just as my pulse started to quicken, the sound shifted. It wasn't breathing anymore. It was kind of like a low growl, almost like a dog, but only more menacing. And it was coming from something much bigger, much more dangerous. My body was frozen, a mix of dread and confusion rooting me to the spot. I was too terrified to get up and check. Every instinct I had screamed at me to stay put, not to look, not to move. But then my cat, who had been sleeping at the foot of my bed this whole time, suddenly started growling. His fur stood on end and his eyes locked onto the window. That's when I realized he was sensing it too. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at him. I didn't dare look at the window, but I could feel it. Something wrong just outside watching us. I didn't know what else to say, so I squeezed my eyes shut and started silently begging, "Please go away, please go away, please go away." I don't know how long I stayed like that, trembling, barely breathing, but at some point the feeling began to lift. The oppressive presence that had filled the room slowly faded, and when I finally opened my eyes, the air was still. My cat had calmed down, curling back up on the bed, but I couldn't bring myself to look towards that window. The next morning I went outside to check. From my window I could see the graveyard I hadn't noticed before, but now it felt like it was glaring right back at me. From that night on, the feeling of someone or something trying to come into my room returned several times, and it was always the same, the sense that someone was creeping up the stairs or lurking near my closet, or in it. Even though I never heard that breathing or growling again, it still felt like something was watching me from the shadows. And the worst part? Sometimes I would catch a glimpse of what looked like a dog's tail out of the corner of my eye, just swishing out of sight. Eventually I couldn't take it anymore, and I begged my sister to swap rooms with me. She agreed, laughing it off. She said she didn't believe in that kind of stuff, and she never mentioned feeling anything weird in the room, which did make me feel a little better. But her boyfriend, who's apparently quite sensitive to spirits, walked into that room one day and immediately froze. "Whoa," he said. "There's something in here." That pretty much confirmed what I already knew. Whatever had been creeping around watching me those nights was real. And it wasn't just my imagination after all. These days I avoid that room whenever I visit. Even though nothing has happened in a long time, I still can't shake the unease that I felt in there. You know, some things just stick with you. My job is price per square meter, daylight angles, and how far the nearest station is if you walk like a real person. I sell floor plans, I sell sunlight, but sometimes things don't always go to plan for those who buy what I sell. I had a Tuesday mid-afternoon showing, second floor 2DK, in a 1980s low-rise, exterior corridor, aluminium/windows, lace shears curtains someone had left behind. When I got in there, I realized that the AC was off. There was no breeze in the courtyard. The air had that dry, boxed-up stillness you get when a unit's been empty, one rental cycle too long. The couple was polite, young, the kind who bring slippers because they read a blog of how to not annoy your agent or something. I did the usual patter, south-facing noise profile water pressure demo. I opened the bedroom door to prove that it didn't bite the floor, and I let the couple look without me being at their shoulder. That day something shocked me, and them, because we saw the lace curtain move. Not a lazy puff of a draft, a pull like someone had sidestepped behind it, a single deliberate sway, fabric lifting and settling as if it had weight at the hem. I checked the window locks, they were latched. I checked the frame with my palm, no vibration or cool air coming through. No AC pushing the air from under the door either. The building was quiet. The elevator in this block is hydraulic and noisy when it runs. I would have heard it. My brain offered explanations in a little queue. Stack effect, pressure change, old sash, and then politely coughed when none of them fit what we saw. "Sorry," I told them, in a cheerful voice. "These curtains are so light that even humidity makes them float." It was a nonsense sentence. The couple nodded the way polite people do when they have nothing to add to the conversation. We then moved into the kitchen. Stainless sink, shallow, no disposal. I turned on the tap to show the water. I turned on the tap for the show of it, and listened to the pipes. They were thin but fine. When I came back to the bedroom, the curtain sat still. The showing was a bit of a waste of time in the end because they didn't apply. They didn't say why, couples rarely do. They just send a polite decline, and go find a place whose walls keep their secrets quieter. Back at the office, I pulled the internal file. There it was, in plain type, a little box, shaded grey, the phrase everybody in the industry can say without moving their lips. A matter to be disclosed. Not this line, but this line of units. Common area event a few years back. Whatever happened there was deemed as an unnatural cause. There was no criminal case. Management had complied with the ministry's 2021 guideline. The owner had complied too. Time had passed, paperwork was correct, but people are people. Sometimes they stand in a room and decide they just don't like how the quiet sits on them. I called the building manager to confirm my notes. He sighed. "We'll keep it clean," he said. "We disclose whenever we have to, but people talk anyway." Then he added, almost as an afterthought, that he was arranging for maintenance on the hokora, around the property line, a little roadside shrine tucked into the hedge near the meter box. "The rope is old," he said, and the neighbors asked. I was there 2 days later for another showing, and saw what maintenance meant in practice. The manager had cleared the litter from the hedge line, swept the concrete pad, and replaced the frayed shimenawa, the twisted rope that marks sacred spaces, and set out fresh offerings, salt, a cup of sake, and a pinch of uncooked rice in clean dishes. He stood with the caretaker from the next block and murmured, "Norito." Neither of them seemed to remember perfectly, but the intent sounded right. It didn't feel theatrical. It felt like picking up after yourself when you've ignored cleaning up for so long. Inside, the unit smelled like generic cleaner and old sunlight. I unlocked the bedroom to make sure it didn't stick. The lace curtain hung the way lace should, limp, indifferent, a piece of fabric in a frame. I stood there for a minute with my clipboard and let myself listen for a reason to leave. But there wasn't one this time. The next applicant came along, a salaryman, single, unfussy. He measured the living room with his forearms because he forgot a tape. The curtain didn't move. He took the place. Sometimes nothing dramatic follows. The form says disclosed, the new rope stays clean for a while until the weather has its say, and rent clears on the 27th. The world keeps turning. I don't add this part to the file because the file is for facts. When I think about that showing later, the detail that sticks is how intentional that first movement of the curtains felt. It was almost like a person trying not to be in the way. And I can't help but wonder what kind of person they were, and what might have happened to them. We fix what we can in paint and plumbing. Sometimes the fix you need isn't the wall or the lease addendum. It's the border where the address ends, and whatever else lives there begins. And we don't sell that in the brochure, but people feel it. And when they do, they look at me like I should have an answer I'm not paid to give. The flat next to mine went quiet in a way that wasn't the normal quiet. People move out and sound changes. You learn the rhythm of doors and footsteps, but this was a pause with weight to it. The nameplate came off. The mail slot got taped over. And during the day the door sat slightly ajar with a yellow "Cleaning in Progress" tag hanging from the doorknob. The corridor picked up a smell that wasn't exactly chemical and wasn't exactly incense. Later, I understood how those two smells could end up together. Everyone knew because buildings talk. Not gossip, just the blunt word people say softly when the lift is empty. Sighed. For a week, I timed my steps so I wouldn't have to look through that gap in the door. I was afraid of it. Then one Saturday, the tag was turned inward, and the door sat on the latch like a gaping mouth. You could see the little step down of the entrance, the line where shoes stop and the home begins. My friend had come over that day. He was going to help me put up a shelf. Like me, he was single and in his 20s. We stood there in the hall, staring in silence. "Should we go check?" he said. Not quite a question, more like the door had suggested it, and he was just passing the message on. "Maybe just the entrance," I told myself. Just enough to look, so I didn't have to be curious anymore. The air inside was strange, not rotten. Whoever had got there first had done their job, but heavy and flat, the way a room feels when the windows have been shut for a long time. A cleaner's caddy sat by the shoe rack, wipes, a pump bottle of citrus something, a neat stack of black bin bags, folded perfectly at the corners. Inside, furniture thinned out for removal, a square on the wall where a calendar used to be, and a pale ring where a plant had sweated into the cheap laminate. In the kitchenette, 2 bowls drying on the draining board. Someone had set a few bits by the door, like they were deciding, take, chuck, call the family. Nestled in there was a small plastic clip, bright blue, the sort you used to seal flour or tea, any kind of bag that's open, and a paper packet the size of a business card folded and tied with a red thread. Maybe a shrine charm, maybe not. It had the hush of something saved. I'm amazed by how well I can recall it. It's imprinted on my brain for reasons you'll find out soon. My friend picked up the blue clip and clicked it open and shut a couple of times, like busy hands need to do. "Good for coffee," he said and threw it over to me. I caught it, and I pocketed it. We lasted 2 minutes in there, maybe, when we stepped back into the hall. All the normal building sounds felt louder somehow. Chattering and laughter came from upstairs. I forgot about the clip until my phone rang after midnight. No caller ID. I stared at it, decided wrong number, let it go. It rang 3 more times, in a row, and then dropped into voicemail. The light in my room felt too bright, like someone had nudged the dimmer without touching the switch. I argued with myself for a second, and then I called my voicemail and listened. But there was nothing to listen to, no message, just air. Not static, not a tape hiss, the steady silence of someone holding their breath across an open line. The next day, 2 more missed calls came at 3:17 a.m. One empty voicemail stamped at 3:18. I told myself it was spam, some kind of auto-dialer. Spammers spoof everything. I told myself not to tell my friend, because we pinched a tiny thing and found a way to call it harmless. That evening I poured hot water into a mug, and it pinged. A thin, nervous note. Something in the kitchen answered back with a clink. The spoon I'd left in the sink was swinging. Tap, tap, like the last ticks of a metronome. My back went tight. I hadn't put the fan on. Nothing should be moving in there. It carried on. Not loud, just steady. Tap, 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 tap. I stood in the doorway, holding the kettle, and I watched the spoon settle. Then, in the bathroom, I heard a drip. It landed on the small ceramic soap dish with a tick. When I pulled the door open, the rhythm shifted. Tick, tick. I slept badly. Not nightmares, just that feeling when you aren't alone, in a room, you know by heart. Before dawn, the phone buzzed again. No caller ID. I answered out of irritation, not bravery. The silence on the other end of the line felt deliberate, not empty, present, as if someone held the receiver close enough for me to hear the idea of their breath. Little things started moving. The cupboard under the sink didn't sit flush in the morning, and I'm very careful with that. The bathroom door, which I'd shut, sat an inch open. The clip, that stupid blue clip, was on my counter, and I don't own anything else in that color. I don't know how it got there. The next time my friend came by, he made a joke before I could. "I'm getting them too." He showed me his screen. Unknown calls, 3 times between 3 and 4 a.m., and a voicemail that sounded like a room with the person taken out. We stood in my kitchen with the tea going cold and listened to my dishwasher that was running. "I think it wants it back," I said. It sounded dramatic out loud. It didn't sound wrong though. The door next to mine was on the latch, like it had been waiting for us to be embarrassed enough to come on our own. Inside, the same flat air. The caddy was gone. A single black bag waited by the genkan, mouth open, like something had been pulled out in a hurry. There's a point when your spine knows before your head does. I threw my friend the blue clip. He caught it, and put the clip back exactly where he found it, careful, like setting a cup down next to someone asleep. Standing there, I had that bird-on-a-wire sense of being watched, not from a corner, but by the room itself. Along the line where the wall meets the ceiling, as if there were eyes there, and every one of them were open. Nothing moved, nothing needed to. It was just a feeling. We didn't tell the building manager. I mean, what were we gonna say? We borrowed something from a dead person's flat, and then someone rang us about it? That wasn't a story for forms and signatures. What we took just wanted return. That night, the phone stopped ringing. The spoon, when it tapped, sounded like a spoon. The cupboard, and the cupboards kept their lines. You could build a neat stack of coincidence. Spam calls clump, old fittings settle. People see patterns when they're rattled and pat themselves on the back for spotting them. You could say all that and be perfectly correct, but there's a reason why people don't pocket stones from shrines, even when the stones are just lying there. And there's a reason why you don't take coins from plates that aren't yours. We took a small thing, a clip. Yet I have never looked at one the same again. I still pass that door. It's got a new nameplate now, a different smell when it opens. Someone else's slippers lined up, neat on the mat. The kid who moved in waters a trailing plant every morning and says goodnight to it under his breath. And it makes me like him. Sometimes in that fraction of a second, when I line up with the peephole, I feel the building take inventory. Here, not here, returned. You know, I nearly kept the clip. There's a version of me that does. Nothing obvious happens. Months later, he's still letting the phone ring on nights where the air is too still, letting it drop to voicemail because it's easier to hear nothing than to answer and admit that someone is there.